Welcome to Patching Systems using Content Lifecycle Management in SUSE Manager 4. My name is Rain Curtis, and also I don't have him here today, but he helped out, and that's Dario Lady from Italy. As a developer to the SUSE Manager team, he's the main contributor for these features. This is a hands-on session, but with SUSECON Digital, there's been some changes, as you're probably well aware, and so we want to show you how the lab should go during this session. So I'm going to talk about the technology, the concepts themselves, and how it can all be set up, and then I'll actually demonstrate the hands-on lab. So when we talk about content lifecycle management, we're talking about being able to match repositories and patches with the systems in our environment. And specifically what we're talking about is being able to control that to be able to provide stability. And so content allows us to, and when we talk about a life cycle, what we're referring to is that we're able to take patches, introduce them into dev, and then promote them into test, and then promote them into production in a controlled environment. Each channel set, we will create a channel set, which will end up being repositories for the remote systems. Those channel sets will be snapshots in time of what we can have and what we want for our systems. So when we look at what is content lifecycle management as far as what we need to set up, well, we're going to talk about a project, and we'll have a project for every distribution. And then within that project, we'll have sources. Each source will be a collection of channels which will be mapped to our different environments, as well as we can have filters, and we'll show how to set that up, and then we'll build out our environments for each of these specific distributions. So within our project, we will attach sources to the project, and as we attach a source, we're saying these are the repositories I want to use, and that will present everything from those sources. Well, we may not want that, so that's where we'll introduce a filter, and it's not necessarily displayed here in the diagram, but that filter would be applied before we start building out our environments. And then from dev, test, and prod, we would go through a promotion process. That would complete our life cycle to where when we start that again, we would then start building out our environments, maybe by changing our sources or our filters. Now the advantage of that is a lot of times in the past people are changing their channels. Well, when you change the channels on your systems, it can be a hassle. Now if you've got a small environment and maybe 10 systems, it's a little bit of an annoyance. If you've got thousands or tens of thousands of systems that you're managing with SUSE Manager, now we're talking about a huge problem. So using content lifecycle management allows the systems to receive updates to their channels without having to reassign them. So when we look outside of the project and what are all the components that we're going to set up, is we'll set up content lifecycle will let us set up the channel sets. We will then need to create activation keys and bootstrap scripts, or depending on how you're bootstrapping your systems, we can do it through the interface that will go to our environments. So let's get into the hands-on demo. So how do we set up content lifecycle management? Well, these are the steps that we're going to go through at a high level to set this up. First, we're going to create a content lifecycle project. We'll attach sources to that project. We'll define a filter for that. Then we'll build out our environments, create activation keys, edit or create our bootstrap scripts, and then register systems into SUSE Manager. So let's jump into that. First thing we'll do is we'll log into SUSE Manager. Now for you to go through this in your environment, you really just need to have a SUSE Manager system. I've set up a SUSE Manager system and a few systems in KVM that will be registered in here. Now to go to Content Lifecycle Management, we go to the left column and we go down to Content Lifecycle. Notice I do not have any projects here, so I'm going to create a project. Now what I've done is to help out is I've added a few things here, and I would say that this could help you in your environment as far as having a naming convention. So in this case, I've got Content Lifecycle. I'll give the same name, and I don't need a description, so I'll leave it blank. So we'll hit Create. Alright, so now I've actually created my project for SUSE-15 SP1. The next thing I want to do is attach sources to that project. Now on here we see the type is channel. Okay. In the future there may be additional options, but at this point you'll always use channel. Whatever distributions you have synced with the SUSE Customer Center that you've been given entitlements to receive updates for, that's what will show in your list. In this situation I only have SUSE-15 SP1, and notice that I have the different channels that I want. In this case I'm going to include all channels. Alright. Now one thing to also note about sources is I could attach multiple channels from different base channel sets. But for this situation and showing how to set up, we'll keep it simple. The next thing we'll do is attach filters. Okay, I'm going to create a filter here, and in this case, let's call it we'll call it Q1 2020. And what I want to do is I want patches all the way up and to the end of Q1. Okay, and so now what I'm going to do is we'll go down to patch issue date, and we'll say later or equal to. Okay, and let's select our date, and we'll go back to April 1st. Okay, we want to deny anything that's later or equal to April 1st, and we'll come in here and say at the beginning of that day. That way we have patches all the way up to March 31st in our environment. So we'll hit save. Oh, already exists, so let's give it a different name. Okay, so now I've got my sources, and now I've created a filter that will filter those sources, so anything that's between April 1st and now I don't want, because I want to assume that in my use case that in my environment I want systems to only have patches that are maybe been out in the industry for a while, that we can know whether there's any problems, whether security vulnerabilities, instability, those types of things. Alright, so now when we look at here, notice I have this build option and it says 9, so there are 9 things that would change when that happens. However, it's grayed out because I don't have any environments. So the first thing I want to do is create my environment. So let's say let's add an environment, and here let's say we'll do dev. Okay, and in this case, since it's the first one, we can just do that. Now we'll add another environment, and we can do test. Okay, and now we look down here. Notice I have dev and test. Let's add prod now. Okay, so now I've got dev, test, and prod. So the first thing I want to do is actually start building these environments. So I'm going to hit build, and for the version message, I like to put the date in there, but you can put whatever you want. And then we'll hit build. Okay, so notice that you'll have a spinning wheel here that will show you the progress, and when it's done it will show that it's created. But a couple things I want to show you while this is building is, first of all, notice that our build has gone back to 0 on here, and it's grayed out because that is being created right now. As well as a version is automatically created. So notice version 1 on here is created. There's nothing really in version 2 yet. Okay, so that's what would be next. Now when we talk about Okay, we're building a dev environment. What does that mean? Well, what we want to do is go look at our software channels and take a look at that. Okay, notice on here that here was our source base channel that we set up that gets synced from SUSE, right? And it actually says SUSE. Now here is the one for the organization, okay? And if we look at this, first of all, if you look at the base name, you notice it's the name of our project, environment, which is dev, okay? And then the name of the base channel. So if we were to compare this right now and want to know what it's doing, notice these are at 0, where we have 3078. Well, we have 3078 here. So it's going to take a minute for that to sync and for that to build out the environment, but when it does, then we will have a full snapshot, moment in time, up with that filter applied of our dev environment. So now we can come back to Content Lifecycle. Look down here, it's still processing, so we'll give it a minute. Alright, now we see that our dev environment is built, so now we will promote all of our patches and channel sets into the test environment. Alright, now that we have our test environment built, we can promote our patches to our prod environment. Okay, now that we see that our production environment is built out as well, that completes the build out of all of our environments. Now that our environments are built, we can go take a look at our software channel sets. Clicking under software on the left side, now we see that we have 3 channel sets of dev, test, and prod. With the channel sets created, it's now time to create the activation keys. So to do so, we will select Systems. Under Systems, we'll navigate to Activation Keys. Up in the top right corner, we will select Create Key. Now, to keep it simple for this demonstration, we will use a common naming convention. I'll use the same for both the description and the key. Now, after providing the description and the key, we now want to select the base channel. So in here, since we've selected the dev for the name, we want to select the dev channel set. Now, to make our life easier, we'll also select Include Recommended. We can leave everything else as the defaults and simply select Create Activation Key. Now that we've created that activation key, we can repeat the process for the test and the dev environments. We'll select Create Key again. We can now select Test. Select the test channel set, the child channels, and select Create Activation Key. And we just need to do production. Select Create Key, grab production, select the production channel set, child channels, and create activation key. Okay, we have our channel sets created. We have our activation keys created for each one of our environments. The next thing would be to create a Bootstrap script. To do so, I'm going to switch to the command line. I will show you both the command line as well as bootstrapping systems through the user interface if you're not familiar with that. Under pub, we see that we have multiple keys. Now these keys are the GPG keys that have been used to assign these packages and are necessary for bootstrapping systems. So the first thing I want to do is maybe create a default bootstrap script, and I can create one by typing manager bootstrap, and that just created a bootstrap script in that directory shown here. So now I'll change that directory, and what it will do is we'll cp and copy that script, and what we'll do is let's do production first. I like to keep the same naming convention. I think it makes it easier. So maybe we'll start with dev first to keep it easy. Okay. All right. Now there's two main things we need to for this. First of all, we need to create the activation key, and we always remember to put the organizational identifier in there. If you only have one organization, then it's easy. So now we'll put that in there and put the key. And this one was for dev, so we can do that. Now on the GPG keys, a lot of times I like to just keep them all in there, and it makes it easy to duplicate these. So I just grab all keys that were in the pub directory and put them in for this value. Okay. Now I've got my GPG keys and I've got my activation keys. Okay. So now the next thing I need to do is just duplicate that for test and dev. Oh, shoot. Let's try that again. Let's do this for test, not text. Remove that so it's not in the way. We'll jump down to our activation key, and the only thing we need to change in here is to change that to test. Once again, we'll copy this and change this now to prod. Change our activation key to prod. Okay, so we now have 3 bootstrap scripts representing for each one of our environments that are using the activation keys for each one. So the first thing I want to show you before we use the bootstrap scripts is to show you from SUSE Manager. So to do so, we now go to bootstrapping, and in here I'm going to put in, let's say I put in a server 1 dot suselab.com in there, the root, and then here's where I can specify the activation key. So if you're not using the bootstrap scripts, you can bootstrap this way. So here I'll bootstrap this system to 1. And now I'll select bootstrap. Okay, during this process, it will be connecting to that server and bootstrapping it and bringing it into SUSE Manager so that we can manage it. Okay, looks like I had a problem. Let me try that again. Okay, looks like I've got a port 22 problem, so I might not have SSH running on that system. So that's okay. This actually gives us the opportunity to show you how to bootstrap it manually from the command line. So what I like to do is I will SSH to that system. Well, it wasn't working, so what we can do is, let me open up the terminal to that. So here's the console to server 1. and make sure I don't have anything in there that was bothering me. Now what I'll do is I can do, for example, I could do a SFTP to that system. And I'll go to serve www.htdocs pub and bootstrap. If I take a listing, now I can do a get on CL /15. I want this one to be prod. I can download that now. I can run that locally, so I will do so. And here's the bootstrap script. See, it's running. Okay. So if that worked now, if we return to SUSE Manager and we go under Salt, there we see that we had server 1 on there. Okay. We also have server 2 that's now on there. Okay, and there we have server 3. So by bootstrapping each one of those, we now see that they show up under SUSE Manager. Now we'll hit refresh on those, and we'll give those a moment to do so. We'll go look at server 1. Now if we look at server 1, we see that it is using the production repositories. Okay. Now a lot of times you'll see things showed there as saying that the system's up to date. If we go to software and we say update package list, that will provide a query to that system to update its package list and put it in the SUSE Manager inventory. While that's doing its thing, we're going to come down to here and we'll let these systems be added as well. Probably just taking a little more time for that to happen. Okay, if we want to try to bootstrap a system through the user interface, I didn't have SSH running, so I went and just enabled that. So let's try that again. If we go to bootstrapping, because I want you to be able to see that. So just after enabling SSH service on there, now I can do server. We'll do server 3 this time. And server 3 we'll put in dev, and now we'll hit bootstrap. We'll let that run over SSH. Obviously you need to have not only the service running, which I didn't, but we also need to have our firewall rules allowing us to SSH that system for this interface to work. So we'll give that a second. Okay. Okay, the fact that it's taken some time is a good sign. Let's go look and see while that's running under, alright, we'll stay on the page. I was thinking it would let us browse away, but we will wait for that to happen. Okay, it looked like it successfully bootstrapped that system. So now, to verify that, we can go under Salt, and we see there is server 3 in there that we just bootstrapped through the interface. And if we click on it, we see that it, since we used the dev key, it was bootstrapped into the dev environment. The last of all, we also did server 2, and so we will accept that key and we'll give it a moment for it to come into SUSE Manager. Now, during this process, as it comes in, not only do we have to accept its keys, but there are some states that are applied and some inventory that's done for that. So we can give that a moment for that to happen. But once again, under server 3, now we can select that. It does take a minute also for the inventory to happen. If we wanted to force it, once again, we can do this update list. We'll come back here. It still says up to date. While we're waiting on that, we can come under salt. We're still waiting on server 2 for that to happen, but that's all right. We'll give it time. But within this environment, we've been able to bootstrap our systems for the different environments. Okay, after giving it a minute, server 2 has been brought into our environment. In fact, let's reload the page there. Okay, it's brought in, but it hasn't done the inventory yet. So now we can come in, SUSE here, and update its package list. And now it will show the packages that it needed. So within this session, we talked about how we could use content lifecycle management to set up different patching channel sets for each one of our environment. And we set up a dev, a test, and a production. We had a server in each one. We created the activation keys and bootstrap scripts for each one. So now that we can bring systems from each one of those in each environment. I appreciate you attending this session. I hope you found some value in learning how to use content lifecycle management, and hope you enjoy the rest of SUSECON Digital. Thank you.